Hello boys and girls. Today we're going to be learning about adverbs, and adverbs unfortunately is probably one of the most difficult grammar topics you're going to learn this year. That's because they are easily mistaken for other words, and in this case it is super important that you guys pay attention to the role that the word is playing in the sentence. I'll explain what that means a little bit more later on, but this is something that it's totally fine and a really good idea actually for you guys to watch and rewatch this video multiple times to make sure you really get these concepts and that they've really sunk in before you take your test. So what is an adverb? Well, an adverb is a word that tells how, when, or where something happens. So an adverb basically describes a verb, which is an action. Now, we've learned a type of word that describes another type of word before. We've learned about adjectives. Adjectives describe nouns, though. So in this case, adverbs are different because they don't describe nouns, they describe verbs. So they can appear before or after verbs. They can actually be anywhere in the sentence. You have to be really careful in keeping your eyes peeled for them. And one easy way to spot some adverbs is that many adverbs end in the letters ly. So whenever you see a word that ends in ly, it is probably an adverb, but not all adverbs do end in ly. So that's going to be where it gets kind of tricky. So what do adverbs look like? Well, adverbs that show how an action happens might look something like this. An example is, the plane's engine started noisily. Notice that noisily comes after the verb, and it describes how the engine started. That's why it's a how adverb. And it does end in our key two letters here that are a clue, ly. However, adverbs can also show when an action happens. So in this example, our flight leaves soon. Again, you have an adverb that comes after the verb leaves. Notice I've always underlined the verbs for you here. It comes after that verb and it describes when the flight leaves. When does it leave? Soon. So if you can ask yourself that question, when, does it answer when the flight leaves? Yes, it does, because it says soon. Then that's probably the adverb. Remember, the adverb has to be describing the verb. It can't be describing a noun or anything else in the sentence. Adverbs that show where an action happens also might look something like this. Example, I looked around. Looked is the verb. Around is the adverb. Notice neither of these two adverbs that I've marked here actually end in our clue letters ly, so you have to be really careful. These two words come near the verb, but they don't have to. They could come before the verb, they could come after the verb. It can be sometimes very difficult to spot the adverb, so you have to look for that word in the sentence that describes either how the action is happening, when the action is happening, or where the action is happening. Let's look at some more examples. So some more examples of adverbs that show how an action happens might look like this. They walked slowly down the street. Here we have an adverb that does end in these clue letters ly, and it describes how they walked. How did they walk? Slowly. I quickly ran to my friend's house. In this case, quickly comes before the verb, and it does end in those two clue letters, ly, but the key important thing to remember is that it describes how they ran to the house. So how did they run? How did I run to my friend's house? Quickly. It answers that how question. She crept silently into the room. This one comes after the verb, and it does end in ly. And it does answer that how question. How did she creep into the room? Silently. The next example is, I gently pet my cat. How did you pet your cat? Gently. All of these examples end in ly, but remember, they don't always have to, so you might have to look a little bit harder than just for those ly words. Let's look at some more. So there are also adverbs that show when. Let's look at some more examples. I went yesterday. Yesterday doesn't end in ly, but it does describe when I went. So when did I go? Yesterday. The next example says, finally we scored a goal. When did I score a goal? Finally. This one does end in ly, but it may not pop out to you as a very obvious adverb, so be careful with that one. I hope I win my game tomorrow. Tomorrow isn't anywhere near the verb here, so you might have trouble finding it, but if you ask yourself, is there a word in the sentence that tells when the action takes place? When did I hope to win my game? Tomorrow. That question answers, this answer here answers that question, therefore it is your adverb that shows when the action is happening. The last example says, I often make bacon for breakfast. Make is your verb here. So when do you make bacon for breakfast? Often. This answer to that when question is going to be your adverb when you're looking for a when adverb. And lastly, let's look at some examples of adverbs that show where an action takes place. These ones can be particularly difficult, I find. One example is, I saw a bird flying outside. Where was the bird flying? Outside. She looked down at her shoes. Where did she look? Down. The balloon floated up to the sky. Where did the balloon float? Up. The fly buzzed around and annoyed us. Where did the fly buzz? Around. These can be difficult, especially because these kinds of words like outside, down, up, around, those can often be seen as different kinds of words, not just adverbs, depending on the role they play in the sentence. For example, you might recognize some of these as prepositions, but they no longer play the role of prepositions in these sentences because they're not actually part of a prepositional phrase. That's why it's so tricky to find adverbs sometimes, because just like any other word that you can find in a sentence, sometimes it's going to wear a different hat depending on the wording in the sentence. So like I've said in the past in the classroom, that sometimes different words can show up differently in different sentences. They can wear a different hat if they're playing a different role in that sentence. So even though around might be a preposition in one sentence, in this sentence it's not. It's actually an adverb. So you have to be sure whenever you're looking for an adverb, does that word describe a verb? Or is it part of something else? Maybe a prepositional phrase, maybe it's a noun phrase, maybe it's a subject or an object in a sentence. Either way, you have to be sure that you're actually defining it by the right definition. Adverbs only describe verbs. So that's some important notes you need to remember when we're doing practice. Don't forget, adverbs can never be nouns, people, places, or things. Ever. So even if you see a word that maybe answers one of those questions, like where did we go to the park, that doesn't mean it's an adverb. If it's a noun, a person, place, or a thing, it's not going to be an adverb. They will also never be the subject of a sentence. So if you see it at the very beginning of the sentence, make sure it's not the doer of the action. If it is, it's not your adverb. Adverbs must also describe how, when, or where the action, aka the verb, happens. So make sure that that's the actual role that the word is playing in the sentence. Let's do some practice. Identify the adverb in the sentence. Identify if it shows how, when, or where the action happens. She looked everywhere for her lost headband. I've underlined the verb for you here. Looked. Do you see a word that describes how, when, or where that action happens? If you said everywhere, that's correct. And there's actually a clue in the word itself as to which question this answers, how, when, or where. The word where is in it. It's actually a where adverb. How about the next one? She opened the gift carefully. Opened is your action here. Do you see an adverb that describes how, when, or where she opened the gift? That's right. Carefully. She opened it carefully. Which question does that answer? If you said how, you're right. How did she open the gift? Carefully. How about the last one? She left the camp today. Left is your action here, but is there a word that describes how, when, or where she left the camp? That's right. Today. Today answers when she left the camp. Let's try some more. These are a little bit more difficult because I haven't identified the verb for you. You have to find the action. I mixed the ingredients rapidly and spilled some. Do you see a word that describes how, when, or where the action in the sentence is taking place? If you said rapidly, that's a great guess. Maybe you notice that it ends in ly. That's a great clue that this might be our adverb. It answers how I mix the ingredients. How did I mix the ingredients? Rapidly. How about the next one? Cynthia woke up early. Do you see a word that describes how, when, or where Cynthia did the action in this sentence? That's right, early. This one actually answers what? How, when, or where? Well, early describes when she woke up. So that would be a when adverb. Let's look at the next one. He answered the questions quietly. The question quietly. Do you see a word that describes how, when, or where the action happens in this sentence? That's right, quietly. And this actually answers which of those three questions? How. If you said how, you're correct. How did he answer the question? Quietly. Awesome. Let's try a few more examples. Tara will be arriving soon. Do you see a word that describes how, when, or where Tara will be arriving? That's right, soon. She will be arriving soon, which answers when she will be arriving. See how that word describes that verb arriving? It doesn't describe Tara or anything else in the sentence. You want to make sure the adverb is always describing the verb and only the verb. How about the next one? She sometimes makes pancakes. Do you see a word that describes how, when, or where that action is taking place in the sentence? That's right, sometimes. What is that describing? Is it describing how she makes pancakes, when she makes pancakes, or where she makes pancakes? That's right, if you said when, she sometimes makes pancakes tells you when she makes them. Let's look at the last one. He returned inside when Mom called. Do you see an adverb here that describes how, when, or where the action's taking place? That's right, inside. We're looking at that verb returned and seeing if there's a word that describes how, when, or where it takes place. It takes place inside. So that's describing where the action is happening. All right, boys and girls, you are now ready to start practicing this week. So this week you will rewatch this adverbs lesson video to review these concepts as needed. You're going to practice identifying adverbs and whether they describe how, when, or where an action happens by completing the adverbs practice assignment on Study Island. You're going to earn your blue ribbon and continue practicing that a few times at least to see if you can get better and better and to get yourself ready for your adverbs test, which you will take on Study Island, check over your answers, and submit it. Please let me know if you have any questions, boys and girls. Have a wonderful day.